Hello, book lovers, and welcome to another episode of Authors Love Bookstores from a Mighty Blaze. I'm your host, Joe Moldover, author of the novel Every Moment After, and I am so happy to be back here with you today. For over 2 years and over 100 episodes, Authors Love Bookstores has visited independent booksellers across the United States, Canada, and the United Kingdom to support the bookstores we love and to visit with the authors who love them. Today is our very first visit to the great state of Montana. We are in Bozeman, Montana at the Country Bookshelf with bookseller Kathy Francisco. Kathy, thank you for being here today.
Oh, thank you for the invitation. We're so happy to be here.
Absolutely. Kathy, after retiring from 30 years in the field of education, became a bookseller at the Country Bookshelf. And in addition to her collection of books, and this is something that we will be talking about, has two outstanding connections, library cards and annual passes from Yellowstone National Park. We shall discuss. On the other side of the frame, we have Catherine Raven. Catherine is a former National Park Ranger at Glacier, Mount Rainier, North Cascades, Voyageurs, if I'm saying that correctly, and Yellowstone National Parks. She earned a PhD in biology from Montana State University. Her essays have appeared in American Scientist, Journal of American Mensa, and Montana Magazine. And she is, of course, the author of the critically acclaimed and best-selling Fox and I. Fox and I has won a PEN America Literary Award. It's a New York Times bestseller. The New York Times calls it a smart and tender memoir. Kathy, thank you so much for being here, and congratulations on the success of the book.
Thank you.
I am going to begin by inviting you, Kathy Raven. We're going to have to make clear which Kathy I'm addressing on the program, by asking you why we are here with Country Bookshelf. Tell us about this bookstore and what makes it so special.
It's in Bozeman, Montana. It's the largest bookstore in Montana. And it's so important to have a bookstore where people know your name when you go into the store and you trust their selections. It's huge. It's an enormous store. It's got a balcony, which is I love the balcony very much. A glass section where you can look into a cafe, which isn't theirs. There's no food actually in there, but it's right downtown Bozeman, so you can go around the corner and eat. You don't have to be an author to be known at a bookstore. If you shop at bookstores and they get to know you, that's just terrific to be able to walk into a store. So I don't do that with clothing stores or with grocery stores, but with bookstores, it's so lovely to have a store where they know your name and they know you. And something else, maybe I shouldn't be snitching about this, but if I live really far away, but that's the closest huge bookstore to me, right? It's the closest city to me is Bozeman. If you live even in Livingston, which is like 30 miles away or so, the folks at the bookstore, if you buy your book there, you don't have to pay the shipping just for the 30 or 40 miles, because somebody from the bookstore will just drive it to Livingston and give it to you. Distances don't mean as much to us in Montana as they do in New York or someplace where you just walk a couple blocks and get whatever you want. It's really not a big deal to drive 60 miles to get to a bookstore.
That's that the line, Kathy, your line. You don't have to be an author to be well known in a bookstore. Put that on a T-shirt. I mean, that's just that's just wonderful. Kathy Francisco, you are coming to us as a bookseller who after having had a whole other career. Tell us, many of us who run this show, who watch this show, have a very romantic notion of independent bookselling. We all think about quitting our day jobs and going to work in an independent bookstore or starting an independent bookstore. It seems like a dream. Give us a reality check. What has it been like? What is it like to work at Country Bookshelf? Tell us about that transition.
Well, the transition for me was one of good fortune, because most of the positions I had in education had to do with literacy. So I've had this love of books my entire life. So landing a part-time job at the bookstore was just a wonderful way to spend my retired days. And it's almost like I feel like I'm in book paradise because I'm surrounded by books, new book releases each week, but all those staid and true books that are lining the shelves. And I think one of the best things about it are all the folks who come in and fellow booksellers who just have this love of reading. And it's this continual conversation about what you're reading or a new book or looking for an old favorite. And so, although, of course, there's a lot of invisible work that goes on to make the country bookshelf really successful with the book buyer and colleagues who are really expert at selling books, the love of books is what really keeps people through. Sure, there's a lot of book shelving and dusting and unpacking, but it's well worth it when you find a book or match a book with a reader who's looking for something.
Yeah, I love that. And I want to remind our audience, both those of you who are with us live now online, thank you for being here, and those in future time who watch this video. We are here to support Country Bookshelf. And the best way to do that is to pick up a copy of Fox and I from Country Bookshelf through the link that we're dropping in the chats right now. I understand that there are a limited number of autographed paperback copies in the store. So act now and pick up your copy. Follow the link. Kathy Raven, yeah, I want to ask you a little bit. I want to talk a little bit about Fox and I mean, this book has just been, kind of a phenomenal book. It's one of these books that just came out and has had this commercial and critical success. I feel like it's kind of been everywhere. Everybody that I've mentioned to this show to, that I'm going to be talking to you today, has sort of been like, oh yeah, I know that book. I know that book. I mean, so so congratulations on the success of the book. I had a question for you about it. Well, something that struck me about it, because very early in the book, you articulate a certain amount of, I don't know if ambivalence is the right word, but maybe ambivalence about talking about this relationship, your friendship that you're developing with this fox. And you're you're a PhD biologist. You sort of talk about this taboo in wildlife biology against anthropomorphism and kind of attributing human characteristics and relationships to wild animals. Early on in the book, you kind of are a little bit cagey about talking about this with some of your students. You don't really want to let on that this is sort of something that's happening. Here we are live on the internet talking about this with a New York Times bestseller describing the experience. What is that like? What is that? I guess the question is, why did you write the book? I mean, what was that path from not wanting to talk to anybody about this relationship to telling the world about it? Tell me about that.
So the book's dedicated to Fox. I wrote the book as a debt, to pay a debt that I owed him. And I'm selling the book and talking to you and talking about this book whenever and wherever I can as a continuation of that debt to the fox. He changed my life so much. And I knew about 2 years into the relationship, it's not a spoiler, but I will say something that happened in the book, and I describe it in the book. When he brought his second set of kits to my house after midnight in almost a full moon, and he let me babysit them while he just slept or pretended to sleep nearby. And it's so dangerous, these little tiny animals, and there's a weasel in the drawer, and there's feral cats around. They outweigh him by a lot, so they certainly outweigh the kits. And he trusted me that much, to have a friend trust you like that, to have another individual trust you. And then that night I realized the joy that he had brought, so much joy into my life. My days just revolved around him. I planned my schedule around him, day after day after day, for year after year, around him and the joy that he gave me and the trust. And I thought, love is a word that I don't use in the book. It didn't really mean anything to me. It's a word that people just use so casually to talk about a meal that they had last night or their new sneakers, and then how you feel about a person or an individual. But to me, love can't really be defined any more specifically than joy and trust. And I was working on a textbook that night when I realized that, and the end of that text, I was sitting at this very desk, just like swept the pages from the textbook off the desk, and I never picked it up again. And thought, I have to write about him. So that's part of the story. Why? Is because I owed him a debt, but not just because he changed my life so much, but because he wanted to be known. I really believed that. I think he wanted to leave a legacy. I think that's one of the reasons why he was hanging around with me. And it took me a long time to figure out why he was hanging around with me. Protection, maybe, or just because he had spare time and I was the only big mammal around to do things with him, play games, walk with him, keep an eye on him. I know that there are some humans, maybe most humans, want to leave a legacy. I'm not really one of them. I never really thought about that. I'm not that. It's just not part of my DNA. But because it is part of human DNA, and because we're so closely related to other animals, and certainly we share a lot of DNA with foxes, it's every single human trait isn't something that's unique to humans. That's just insane to think every personality trait is a human trait. And I really think he wanted to matter. So if you write the book and if you sell the book, then he does matter. He gets his way. He gets what he wants. So those are the two things: the debt plus the fact that he wanted to matter. That's just what he wanted.
Yeah, that's very beautiful. It's a really beautiful way of expressing that. And I wonder if I could just ask a follow-up question, which is, it is in many ways such a idiosyncratic story. Have you been surprised that people have responded the way that they have?
Sure, I have, because I thought while I was writing the book that there was going to be a girl in the mountains in Pakistan who would love this book. And I knew that there were some folks that lived in isolated places around the world that were just not touched by the modern culture and still believed in our relationship with other living things. And I didn't think any of them lived in the United States, or that very many of them did. But I was hoping that it would encourage people to start believing things that they kind of wanted to believe, but that no one had encouraged them. And it happened, but I wasn't expecting it. Again, I was expecting it would be popular in third world countries and places that don't have this modern culture where we pretend that everything has to be looked at through a microscope and proven, and logic and numbers matter, and you have to count things up, and you can't just trust your common sense and your human nature. And this is really a book that celebrates human nature and the power of every single man. By man, I mean humans, every single person, to make up their own mind, to trust their own instincts, because that's what our human nature is. And our human nature, it really ties us to foxes. It really does, and to other living things. We've pulled away in our modern culture. But I think that if you forget about what modern culture is telling us, you'll realize that we did evolve much closer life with other living things, but they haven't changed very much, and we have. So now we live in these kind of huge, not just huge houses, but we're living in skyscrapers. Right. We used to live on the ground right next to them. We used to walk the same places they walked and eat the same food. Now we get our food in grocery stores and packaged and prepared in all kinds of there are so many things in our food that isn't even natural. And
right.
the foxes are still eating the same things they've been eating for thousands of years, right? So they haven't changed, but we have.
Yeah, the distance between humans and nature is something I want to come back to in just a moment, especially in the context of environmental catastrophe, and that's something I want to talk to you about. But first, but before we move on to that, Kathy Francisco, I sort of have my ideas about why people are responding so strongly to this book, but you are the professional. You tell us a little bit about what do you think is really special and unique about Fox and I? Why do you think people are responding to it the way that they are? How would you describe it to somebody who hasn't heard of it? Somebody who wanders into the store and picks it up and says, "What's this? Is it about a fox? Like what's up with this?" What do you have to say about this book?
Wow. It's easy to talk about Kathy's book just because for me, it's such a genuine story. Her talking about all the natural history elements in the region. And what comes to mind right away is just the beauty with which the relationship unfolds between her and Fox. And this speaks to a question that I had for Kathy. I was curious. It's the idea of timing. In the story, you're talking about perhaps making a change in your living, and here it's like this gift of Fox presents himself, and the idea of you being open to that possibility of building a relationship, a really strong friendship with him. So it just has those, going back to the story of how it's easy to sell to readers. It's just the genuine nature of how we want to find connectivity. And Kathy just happened to find the courage to reach out for a friendship with Fox. And so, Kathy, I'm wondering about the timing of that for you as well. Do you see how it was just like just the perfect scenario for you, where you were ready for a more a meaningful relationship, and there was Fox for you?
That's right. I had been traveling a lot, and I didn't really have any roots. Traveling different national parks, and then you're a college student in dormitories and a graduate student in dormitories. And I was finally ready to think about settling down in what I foolishly thought I should find a career, since I had a PhD, and that would of course bring me to a city. So I was ready, only I was going out I was going in the wrong direction. And at first, he was the monkey wrench, because the last thing I wanted was a reason to stay in the middle of nowhere on this open land that was really impossible to make a living. I didn't have a internet connection. So we barely do now, but I didn't have an internet connection, and there was no running water. So yes, I thought, I don't want him to be dogging me around and trying to pretend like he needs me, because I don't want a friend, and I don't want a friend out here. I need to move. But he wheedled his way in to my life, really just like someone casts a spell over you. And it was the right time. But he also, as I started watching him, I started reverting away from modern human culture back to thinking of what was my nature and what was natural. And what is natural is to think about your habit and your habitat. I should have known that, because working as a biologist, that's what you do when you collect plants and you make herbarium specimens. You record their habit and their habitat. And I had forgotten to think about my habit and my habitat. And I was looking for a career, a title, some kind of a profession. He made me reach back to think about what I wanted to do and where I wanted to live, how I wanted to live, and where. And it was the perfect time. And I understand why people who are at other points in their life, they've gone past that. So, Saint X, maybe you can pronounce it better than I can, the author of The Little Prince, he talks about us being a clay that can be molded, but only to a certain point. And then he says, it's all over. You can't go back. Once that clay hardens, it's too late. So my clay hadn't hardened yet. And that is just absolutely that was the perfect time, Kathy, for me, because I was
That's
still
fascinating. Yeah, it was just that moment. That's fascinating. To the online audience, feel free to drop your own questions for either Kathy Raven or Kathy Francisco into the chat. We're happy to pick them up. If you're watching live or if you're watching in the future, follow the links to the Country Bookshelf in Bozeman, Montana, and pick up a copy of Fox and I. We're going to be giving you some other ideas for books you can pick out in a few minutes. Kathy Raven, one of the things you touched on earlier was this idea of the divorce between human sort of functioning, typical human life and nature that so many people experience. And, of course, we're at a time now when sort of nature kind of isn't having it in a lot of different ways. A concept as well that you introduced me to in the book and you introduced your students to that I thought was a fascinating concept was this idea of evolutionarily stable or unstable behavior, which I'm always going to think about from now on when I'm always going to think about who's behaving in an evolutionarily stable or unstable way. But one thought I had is that in many ways humanity is behaving in an evolutionarily unstable way at this moment.
So
And
true.
I wonder, and before we came on air, you were just in Yellowstone. You were telling me a little bit of that story and what is happening where you live now, and in particular, what's happening to the foxes. But will you share with the audience a little bit of that story?
Yes, I was in the middle of Yellowstone National Park with students right in the middle of the park. It had been raining deluge day after day after day, and I was in the middle of the park when all the roads were closed. I only found out about it because there happened to be a ranger nearby talking to me, and his radio went off. He didn't know why the entrances were closed, but we knew it had something to do with the water. I had been in the park as a firefighter in 1988, and they hadn't closed all the entrances then. And I know the superintendent of Yellowstone is a completely outrageously competent person. And I thought, oh my God, so Cam Shawley's closed all the entrances. This isn't, he's not a guy that's panicking here. This is a serious, this is what needs to be done. Something's going on. So we got out the south gate of the park. And as we were coming out, of course, they were rerouting everybody who was trying to come in. As we came out of the park, though, creeks and such looked like lakes. In front of my house is the Yellowstone River, which is normally kind of snaky. And it's large right now. It looks like a lake. It's a round oval in front of my house where it comes by instead of being snaky. People have lost their homes, and there's a lot of flooding going on. Rivers are dynamic things, and the Yellowstone is the longest wild river in the United States, meaning that it's not dammed or rip-wrapped, it's not channelized. Rivers that are used for transportation have been contained by us, so we control them. But a wild river is a river that we don't control. It goes where it wants to go. That's one reason you should come to Yellowstone, because of the Yellowstone River. When you're in the middle of the park in Hayden Valley and you see that river, it's spectacular. It braids, it has channels, it has islands in it. And unnatural rivers don't do that, because if you need them for transportation or you want to put houses right up to the edge, you have to rip-wrap them and you have to control them and you have to say, this is where the water's going to stay. So yes, it was pretty frightening for me to get to. I was out of my home for 2 days because the road on either side of my house was the bridges south of me are completely washed out. So I don't know when I'll be able to get out of my house to the south, but to the north, the road was washed out too. So I had 2 days when there was no access to my property. And I am here now because I'm above the river. it was a long ride for me to get from Jackson back to my house. It was pretty frightening driving all the way around to get home. But I don't want to end on a negative note. I want to say if you can get to Yellowstone this summer or anytime, the Yellowstone River, it flood, it killed, it's going to do a lot of damage to some wildlife. But having a wild river in the United States, a long wild river, is a beautiful sight. It really is a beautiful sight. And as you said, there's just so many strange things happening in the world. I think that the river's beautiful. You need to see it. You need to understand the difference between a river that's wild and one that's not. But you also need to understand humans, we're taking over the world in a way that is causing a lot of changes that other living things don't have time to adapt to. And that's just wrong for us to be such bullies on this planet. I don't think that we were meant to be, and something's going to correct. I'm not talking about just climate change. I'm talking about the basic fact, way before climate change, we've known for decades before climate change that there were too many people on the planet, too many people using too many things. And we can't really enjoy wilderness and wildlife if there's just too many of us, because where is the wildlife going to be? Where's the wild land going to be if we just take over everything?
Mm, mm. Kathy Francisco, one of your 3 collections, along with books and library cards, are annual passes from Yellowstone. Give us your take on what's happening there right now, what's happening where you are. What's your experience of it been?
Well, my experience has been through the media, watching what's happening or reading about what's happening. But what I've noticed in Bozeman and in our bookstore, there's been a higher level of foot traffic. So perhaps people are renegotiating their holidays through Yellowstone and perhaps diverting themselves over to Bozeman. And I just wanted to go back to what Kathy was talking about, just the spectacular beauty of Yellowstone. When I included in that short bio that one of my most beloved collections are the annual passes, and kind of speaking to what Kathy said, a group of dear friends and I would hike often down Paradise Valley, which is north of Yellowstone, and typically in the northern regions of Yellowstone. But when we would hike, we would tend to do it in spring and fall, recognizing that there's a huge uptick in visitors in Yellowstone during the summer. So kind of staying back and letting other people enjoy the park while it's being used more, and appreciating the park and its region when it's not getting such a high level of use.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Kathy Raven, the comment that you made just before that is I find it sort of sticking with me a little bit, and it sort of has a bit of the quality of a cliffhanger, that the status quo sort of can't stay the way that it is. It's it's ominous, honestly. And a question that when we have novelists on this show, a question that I'll usually ask is, well, what are you going to do next? Is there going to be a sequel, or is there going to be a follow-up, or whatever? Is there going to be a prequel, or whatever? You're actually, you're as a nature writer, if I can call you that, you're actually writing about a topic that's very much in flux, that's changing very quickly, and that frankly is fairly terrifying. What can we expect from you next? Are you going to continue to follow this, or are you going to tell us? Are you going to tell us what's happening to the foxes in this new environment? Or are you done?
I will continue in essays to do that. My big project is a novel, and I've been working on it for a while, and I'm quite happy with it and really in love with my characters. And the novel very much touches on the idea of humans living in a natural, closer to nature, a more comfortable way with plants and animals and everything around them that's not just a human dominated world. and I think that it's more upbeat. I suppose it's a little bit of a historical fiction, and it does take place in the 1980s during the spotted owl crisis, and the book's called The Owls of Sybil Springs. But it does, I hope, do something what Fox did also, which is to remind people that a relationship with non-human animals can really change your life, how important and significant it is. And the people in the book are all unfamilied, so it's about fellowship, the importance of fellowship, the friends that we bring into our lives because they're kindred spirits. And so the idea of the importance of things, of having a purpose in life. And
That is fabulous. That is, I mean,
Northwest.
I
You
feel like
will
it's,
love it. You will love it. You will love all the characters. I haven't written a story and then thrown in natural elements. I've written the story and the places where I've been and lived in the backcountry. And so the natural elements are just part of the story. All the living world is just right there because that's what matters to the characters. So the setting is just so very much important. You will love it.
that's fabulous. I have to ask a follow-up. Your account of writing Fox and I, your account, I loved the way you described that you were working on this textbook, and then you just kind of had this like sort of like this burst of inspiration and this need to write, and you literally sort of like swept the textbook off the desk and just sort of like poured yourself into this new book. Is writing a novel the same thing for you, or do you find that it's much more a process of purposeful construction?
It's much more creative and entertaining to me. I watch the scenes unfold in front of me, and that's really terrific. Whether I'm sitting somewhere, sitting outside on my deck, or walking, I wait for the characters or call them in, and I'm watching what they're doing, and I watch them and watch them, watch what's happening around them, watch the little frogs that are in the scene, watch the entire scene, and I'll replay it and replay it. Somebody will say something that doesn't sound right to me, and then I'll pause and think, did they really say that? What? Listen to it again and again until I've really memorized exactly what I'm seeing. And then I write down the parts that are important for the reader to know. The reader doesn't need to know everything that everything that I know. I have to know a lot more than the readers. And then I move on to the next scene the same way, just watching. So I'm watching the story as it's happening instead of trying to pull it back from my memory. I'm just letting it happen in front of me. Of course, I know I'm not writing from an outline, but of course I know how it ends. I know basically where the characters are going and what they're doing and what the main events of the story are. But scene by scene, I watch it happen, and that and so I write in present tense because I'm seeing it as it's happening.
Wow, that is fascinating. That's really fascinating. I mean, I speak to a lot of authors, and I've never heard anybody describe it quite like that. That's really fascinating. Well, Kathy Francisco, you're going to have another Catherine Raven book to sell, hopefully fairly soon. Kathy Francisco, a question for you. I have to ask. Collections. We talked about Yellowstone. The book collection is sort of obvious. What's up with the library cards?
Well, similar to bookstores, I just would spend a lot of time at libraries, whether it was at universities where I was attending or places where I was teaching. The public library was just a place of solace for me, and so then I just kept all the public library cards or the university cards as mementos from my past adventures.
That's fabulous. That's fabulous. So, can you tell us how many do you have in your collection now? Do you have a count?
There's 17.
Very nice. Very, very nice. That's in contrast to me, where I lose my library card every 6 months or so. So well done. We've reached the part of the show where we are going to sell some books. And I want to remind viewers again, both live and in the future, we are here to support the Country Bookshelf in Bozeman, Montana. It's a especially important time to support businesses in Montana. We always want to support independent booksellers. We want you to follow the link and go and pick up a copy of Fox and I. Maybe you already have a copy. Pick up another. It's out in paperback now. Give it to a friend. Everybody loves this book. Let's talk about other books. And Kathy Raven, I'll go to you first. What are you reading? What are you excited about? What might you want to recommend to our audience?
Well, I have to say something that's out. Frederick Bachman has a book out now, Anxious People. If Montanans love Frederick Bachman, and so it's light reading, and sometimes it makes me laugh out loud. I'm kind of upset about that book because there's a curmudgeon in it, and I don't get why I am like the curmudgeon person in that book. Not only do I not like that I'm the curmudgeon, but I don't always get why they're making fun of the curmudgeon. That's like really bad. Like,
Fair point.
they make fun of his lack of technology, and I think, I don't get it. What's so funny about using a camera with a flash on it and whatever? So I mean, but I find that when you carry a Frederick Bachman book around Montana and you're like in line for something at the grocery store or wait, people are like, wow, you read that? People like it. So I have to say that. And I also have to say something that you need to get at Country Bookshelf as soon as it comes out, because I love Hilary Mantel, and she's got a collection coming out, and she doesn't write very often. We waited forever for the 3 books that she wrote about Cromwell, which are excellent. If you haven't read Hilary Mantel's series, you should buy all 3 of them. Absolutely. And it is St. X's birthday today. So you must go buy Country Bookshelf. You must buy a copy of Little Prince for yourself and everybody you know. It's his birthday. And so I'm going to be reading more of that tonight. And I'm going to be reading this again. It's by my bet. You should look at all the notes in it. Please buy Saint-Exupéry's books. That's why I call him St. X, because I don't know how to pronounce his name. Maybe Kathy will say it. But Hilary Mantel's new book, and of course, don't forget about St. X, because it's his birthday.
I can't believe we hit his birthday. We didn't even try to do that. That's just luck. Fabulous. All right, links in the chat to buy these from Country Bookshelf. Kathy Francisco, can you sell us some books? What are you excited about?
Oh gosh, before I do that though, I want to encourage people to go to Country Bookshelf's Instagram site, and because we're offering a free copy, a paperback copy of Fox and I. So please check us out on Instagram. And thank you so much to Kathy for Fox and I. Now let's see some of the books. Oh gosh, the book I'm reading right now is Hawk by Helen McDonald. Fascinating story about just the behaviors and it's like for falconry. It's just fascinating. I know that I'm trying to remember the memoir that she wrote with her father, but it's just similar to Kathy. She has this uncanny ability to observe and using really interesting passages for the descriptors of both the loyalty and the behavior and the fierceness of the hawk. It's just fascinating. And then another book that I reread it most summers. It's called The Meadow, and I wish I remembered Galvin's first name. It's this hard scrabble rancher in Wyoming, and how he has to be so ingenious to make life successful for him, working with the land, and just the creativity in creating machinery in the really a very hard, barren landscape.
Yes, James Galvin. Yeah, that's great.
James Galvin. Thank you for the assist. And then what I'm looking forward to is Geraldine Brooks's new book, Horse. That's at the top of my stack to read, hopefully this weekend. So
fabulous. Great recommendations. Fabulous recommendations. The links are in the chat. The audience should head to Country Bookshelf. And yeah, go to the Instagram account and see if you can pick up that copy of Fox and I. Such a total pleasure to speak to the two of you. Kathy Francisco, as we wind down, The last question is always to the bookseller. We've done it for a very long time now. We've gotten all kinds of responses. We'll find out what yours is. Success as an independent bookseller is part luck, part hard work, and part what else?
Oh gosh. There are so many things that come to mind. I think landing in a bookstore that is just rich with the people who are staffed there, be it the leadership of the owner, be it the talent of the book buyers. But I think it's the people that create the atmosphere within the bookstore. And so I think it's the welcoming nature that my colleagues have, and most bookstores I experienced, that it's like you're invited into someone's living room and they want to share the stories and the books with you. So I think that's it.
That's wonderfully said. I think that strikes me as exactly right. I think that's wonderfully said. Thank you both so much for spending time with me today and for spending time with the audience. It's been a complete pleasure speaking to the two of you. Catherine Raven, again, congratulations on the success of Fox and I. It is a unique and a wonderful book, and it deserves all of the praise and awards and positive reviews that it is getting. Kathy Francisco, thank you for being here from the Country Bookshelf. To the audience, thank you for being here. Come back next week, same time, same place. As viewers know, we are counting down the last few states to having gotten to all 50 states. And next week, we are finally making it all the way to Alaska, which has been a long time coming. And who better than Alaska State Writer Laureate Heather Land, coming to us from Haines, Alaska, along with the bookstore in Haines. So that is going to be great. Be here for that. Until then, stay well, keep reading.